just basically want to start off by asking you, what does it mean to feel alive? What does it mean to feel alive? So we have had these feelings of feeling more or less alive, during the course of our life, during the course of any particular day. On the one hand, I was dealing, sad case. I was dealing with a person. I was training a person who was asleep. I was training him in sleep knowledge. He was a social worker who was working in a certain kind of rehab center, and he was mentioning that one of the people who he's working with, because of certain medications that he's taking, he says he feels like he's dead, which is not an enjoyable thing, I imagine, to be going on. So you can have these kind of feelings, with or without medication. Sometimes you can have these kind of feelings. On the other hand, you can feel alive. Sometimes if you do something very, very meaningful, if you make some kind of big contribution, if you have a very, very meaningful connection that you make to another person, it can make you feel alive. So the question is, what's going on under the surface such that some people feel more alive than others? At times of our life, we feel more or less alive. So what's really going on there? So the formula for that really is that life is defined by a connection between the spiritual and the physical. Meaning to say, at its ultimate kind of litmus test, the difference between a person who is alive and who is dead isn't really on the second that they pass away. It's not that much. No, you can't really see so much of a difference in the body from one second to the next. Often people could be unconscious before they pass away anyway, so you don't necessarily see that. So what is, at the end of the day, the difference between being alive and not? The difference is whether your soul is inside your body or whether your soul has left your body. In other words, whether the body and soul are together or whether the body and soul are separate. Once the person passes away, their body and soul continue to exist. They're just existing separately from one another. So in that sense, the definition of life would be the connection between body and soul, ultimately, and in general, spiritual and physical, and the definition of less life is when those things would separate from each other. So I'll just come to you in just a second, and basically, given that could be describing what's going on under the surface of our emotions, our feelings, our state of mind. When we are feeling more or less alive, is there an enhanced connection between the spiritual and the physical? Then we're feeling more alive. Is there more dissociation between the spiritual and the physical? Then we're feeling less alive. I'll just come to you in just a second, Shifra, but I just want to show you this in a couple of sources. So the Mishnah in Avot says as follows. So the Mishnah says, just in the first box over there, first part, it says, Al shlosha devrim ha'olam omed. The world stands on three things, like three pillars of existence of the world, and those are as follows: Ala Torah learning, Val Avodah, on Avodah, work, service, which in our context is going to mean prayer, tefillah. It can also mean korbanot, which are deeply connected. We can talk about that. That's going to be the next year. But Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim, Chesed, kindness. So what we are learning from this Mishnah is that there are three things which are keeping the world going. As the world stands on those things, such that if you were to take one of them away, the world would not be standing. The world wouldn't have existence. So a quick aside, I just remember, I never really checked this out, but I had a roommate in college who was a physics guy, and he told me that the most stable base is a tripod. Is when you have three. So apparently, I don't know, it seems to work that way in spirituality as well. Is that true? Anyone? That's true? Yeah. Interesting. So in that case, that's going to fit with this system over here, where there's three things which are keeping up the world, and if one of them were to not be there, then the world is not having existence. What does that mean in a slightly deeper sense? So let's just look at this Maharal, and we'll come to questions. So is Perush, Maharal's speaking about this Mishnah. He says as follows: Ki haolam omed b'ma sheyesh la'olam devekut bo yitvarach. The world stands in as much as it has a connection to God. I.e., this physical world is alive in as much as it has a connection to spirituality, to God. And there's three kinds of devekuts. There's three kinds of connection that you can have to God, and those are v'hem ha'amudim she'olam omed aleihem. These are the pillars that the world stands on, which are these three things. That's going to be kind of our endeavor over the next three shiurim, is to try and understand what are these three things? What are these three things which are essentially giving life to the world by promoting the connection between God and the world, between spirituality and physicality, and see what we can do to enhance that. That's going to be our aim the next few days. Okay, Shira.
I'm just because you said like life in Judaism is like whether the soul's in the body or outside the body, but like at what point is it considered that the soul has left the body? Like if you're doing CPR on someone, is their soul in or out?
So this is a big question, basically. This is in halakha. There's number one, there's different opinions. The mainstream opinion is that heartbeat is the definition of life and death. Which makes CPR very interesting because there can be people whose hearts have stopped, and then when their hearts are restarted, that would technically be tchiyat hametim. That would be giving life to someone who had been deceased. If that is the case, it would seem to imply that at least in some sense the soul had separated from the body but actually made a comeback. That would appear to be the case. There are other definitions. There are people who hold that brainstem death is a real definition of death. If so, then it becomes really, really interesting, because it really pushes this point of the soul and the body connection or separation being the definition of death. Because brainstem death, the heart still the body can still be like kind of functioning in a certain sense. And yet, if that is really the definition of death, then that would mean the soul has already separated, at least to a large extent, from the body. So it would depend on this kind of like halachic discussion. So it's quite interesting. This is one of the series I wanted to do for you guys one time, is taking a deeper look behind the halakha. We don't usually talk so much about halakha in our classes, but you see that actually there's a lot of spirituality going on behind the actual halakha itself. So that would be the back and forth of that question. Yeah. Okay. So this is our endeavor. So just by way of introduction, as I say, each shiur will go into one of these. We're today going to be focusing on Chesed. But just as a general introduction, you basically have these three things, which is Torah. I'm going to write it in a weird way, if you'll indulge me for a minute. So it's going to be Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. So these three things are the things that the world stands on, and as the Maharal said, these are going to be three modes of connection to Hashem. And as much as there's a connection between the world and God, so then there's life. Then there's life in the world. So what are these three things? So there's three different kinds of connections. One way that you can have connection is through Chesed. What that means primarily is the fact that God is giving life to the world. The fact that He is giving. Chesed is obviously about giving and sharing kindness. So in as much as God is giving to the world, that's a certain kind of connection between God and the world. Imagine if someone who gives you a gift, there's a connection which is forged between. It was nice. It was an interesting thing. I gave a shiur in a high-tech company for a long time, and I just finished that yesterday. I just stopped that project yesterday, and they gave me a little gift, and that was nice. That was like a nice little connection which I had between them. So in as much as there is a gift going in that direction, so that's one kind of connection. So how does that relate? We'll talk about that today, but how does that relate? Because these things are talking about us, the work that we do, right? The way that we keep life going in the world. So when we give to others, we are basically bringing God's kindness into the world even more. Number one, on a level of consciousness. If you're giving, it means you have, and if you have, it means it came from God. So you're kind of like the more you can think about that, the better, right? The fact that I'm giving means that I'm blessed. I have gifts from God that I'm able to give. Interesting thing, Rav Chaim. So he has a book. People are familiar with his book on Lashon Hara. Several books on Lashon Hara. But he also has another book called Avat Chesed. I don't know if anyone's come across it. Loving kindness, something like that. It's really, really interesting. And one of the things he says in that book is basically all the money that a person is given over and above their immediate needs is essentially deposited by Hashem into his account for the distribution to the needy. So it's quite an interesting thing, Okay, so without going into the exact details of what does that mean for savings and right? But the point is just in terms of the idea of it, you see that us giving forth is an indication that God is giving to us. Okay. Moreover, there's actually another thing that God is, in as much as you are giving to others, so God is seeing that giving to you is a good investment. There's an interesting thing that basically there's a Chazal says schar b'hai al maleka, that there's no such thing as reward in this world. The reward is the world to come. The reward is not this world. But there are several verses in the Torah, the Shema being among them, the second paragraph of the Shema, which talks about if you do good, you get good. So in this world. So what is that? So the way that the Rambam understands that is it's more like an investment. That God sees that you're using your assets well, so He wants to invest in you so that you'll use it. So it's not reward; it's actually an investment in you because you're using your resources well, and He wants resources to be used well in the world. So He sees that this is a good person to put resources with. But so again, the more that you're doing kindness, so the more that's bringing God's Chesed into the world itself. So that's mode number one of connection to God, and the fact that God is giving us life, giving us kindness. So that is a way that the world is connected to God. Moving forward, so there's on the other extreme you have avodah, which for our purposes we'll call tefillah, prayer. So that is where, as it were, you come and you share a space with God. Meaning that the tefillah, as we'll talk about, is omed lifnei melech. That is, you're standing before the king. You're actually standing in the presence of God. So it's not just that you're receiving from him, but you're actually there with him, so to speak. And in that sense, it's a connection of proximity, that you're actually having a relationship. So that's another kind, which we'll talk more about tomorrow. So that's the connection of proximity or relationship. And the third kind of connection is through Torah, which is through when we are learning Torah and doing what Torah does for the world, which we'll see in the third session is a very significant things. What we're doing is we're actually connecting to God by emulating Him, because God is one who gives life to the world, and through learning Torah we actually give life to the world. So it's an interesting kind of connection. In a certain way, it's kind of like a connection via independence, because we kind of take on a godly role, like a partnership in a certain way. When you take on that partnership, then that's another version of connection. So you've got Chesed, which is God giving to us. You've got Avodah, which is us sharing a space, having that relationship with God, and then you've got Torah, which is us emulating God, being like Him and partnering with Him in bettering the world. And so those are just the headlines of those three connections. I'll just give you one more thing, is that if you didn't work it out already, so that these are related to the three primary spheros. So you have Chesed on the right side, and then on the left side you have Gevura, and then in the middle you have Tiferet. I'm not really going to go into this so much now. If you want, you can. But just for those who that is interesting for, these are the three primary divine characteristics and interface points between God and the world, and these are kind of being lived out in these three actions that we do. So this is the overview. Okay, anyone want to bring up any points or questions at this stage? Okay, so let's jump into Chesed a little bit. So Chesed, as we've seen, is a pretty amazing thing. It's something which as we were saying, is an amazing thing. Just on a very simple level, it's something that you can do for another person. That's already pretty big. And more than that, it's promoting the connection between God and the world, it's giving life to the world. But it's actually so much more than that. It's more than just an amazing thing. Have a look at this source over here. This is the introduction to the Nefesh HaChaim. Nefesh HaChaim is this amazing book by Rav Chaim Volozhin, which we are learning together on Tuesday nights. The introduction to that book was written by his son, and it says pretty amazing things. And one of them is this one. It says, "V'haya ragil lochiach oti al shira'a she'eineni mishtatef b'tzara da'achrina." That I just want to kind of introduce this with a stereotype to kind of bring out the point. If you were to say, obviously, there's not lots of different kinds of Jews out there, and they have nice different stereotypes associated with them. What would you say is kind of prototypical Litvak, Lithuanian, Litvish Jew? Any particular characteristics of their life, of their personality that you would say? Yeah.
More stingy,
What'd you say, stingy aunt?
And we pick up pennies. That was like back in the day.
What, say again, the stingy aunt? Sorry.
We pick up pennies. Like,
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I don't know if that's Lithuanians in particular, but there's a certain. Some would even it's a little harsh. I think the stinginess. There's some people think things like that. Sorry, Hamdi, yeah.
Have like a lot of strictness involved,
Yeah.
and also like elitism.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I shouldn't have asked this question, but yes. Okay. Well, don't worry. It's gonna get really good. Don't worry. It's good. No, it's gonna get good for the livebacks in a minute. Don't worry. But let's wait. Siva, you want to say something? Yeah, that's a way you can say it strict, halacha, cold hard. Yeah, Kayla.
I'm gonna say not super into Hasidic.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can say. Yeah, you know where I'm going with that. So you can. Yeah, like that's you have the Hasidic way of life, which usually is like the lovey-dovey feeling way of life, and then you have the litvak, which is like cold hard. That's what you think. That's what you think. But that's what people think, and people are wrong. Let's have a look at what the Nefesh HaChaim, he was kind of like the leader in many ways of the Lithuanian world, used to say to his son. His son says about the Nefesh HaChaim that he used to what's it called? To rebuke. He used to tell him off all the time if he ever saw that he wasn't joining in with the pain of other people. Meaning, if there was someone who was experiencing pain, the fact that he didn't feel that pain of other people, said that's absolutely wrong. You can't live your life like that. You have to feel the pain of other people. Moreover, he said, Tami, this is what he always used to say as follows. This is like his catchphrase that the Nefesh HaChaim used to say to his family, right? To his children. He said as follows, Shezeh kol ha'adam. This is the whole human being. Lo la'atzmo nivra. We're not created for ourselves. Rak lo'ha'il la'achrine kachol asher yimatzeh yimtza b'kocho la'asot. The whole purpose of the human being is to help another as much as you possibly can. There's the whole purpose of our existence. As the air conditioning is being turned on to help us all after God turned it off after we were making fun of the bats. What's the point is that this is not something amazing. This is the central point of life. Thank you very much. This is the central point of life. The central point of life is what you can do for others. Which was quite surprising for me, honestly. I wasn't expecting to necessarily read something like that. It's a good thing, but the fact that it's the center point of life, and I just can't say again. It was if you measure, what do people usually do to measure? Let's say there's some people are Bali Tshuva, or some came to religion later. When is one considered to have crossed the threshold of being religious? Like what kinds of things people say? Yeah, that's the word. People say, what do you say? Someone says Shabbos, yeah, Shabbos. Someone said Kashrus. What do you say? Yeah, fair point. So these are the kinds of things which people go to. They just miss the central point of all of our religion, which is to be kind to others. That should be everything's important. Of course, everything's important. And we don't throw away things because they're less important than others. Everything's important. But this is something which should be front center of our minds when we're thinking about what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be a human being. Yeah, sure.
In like more Haredi world, but specifically I suppose in like the Litvish world, there's like a rhetoric, especially for boys, but like the most important mitzvah is to learn.
Yeah.
So how does this
Yeah, you'll have to wait for Shir 3 basically. But Shir 3 is basically going to be the whole Shir 3 is basically about trying to understand that issue. So great question. If you can wait, you can be here on Thursday?
Yes.
Okay. No one leave. But yeah, so that's a question which everyone should have at this stage. And we'll see what we can do about that. So this is okay. So Chesed is absolutely huge, absolutely essential. One question you can ask is, why is it so central? As in, I understand, like, again, different people have different energies, different kind of inclinations in their personality, and some people are more inclined towards it than others, so this can resonate. If something's resonated a lot with me, it resonates a lot with me. Is there an understanding as to why this thing is so important? So here's one possible understanding. And the data one says as follows. He says, the Dazbun is the Ramchal. He says, Hakel Yibarach Shemo, hu tachlit hatov vadai. So we're going back, as sometimes needs to happen around here, is that we're going back to creation and the purpose of God creating the world in the first place. So let's, so to speak, as much as we can do such a thing, get into the mind of God. Why did He create this world? Why do such a thing? So obviously we can't answer that question in an absolute way, because at a certain point of that analysis, we're going to run out of the ability to connect to something once it gets into the realm of the infinite. But to some extent, we can have some understanding of it. So what is the understanding that we can have of it? The Ramchal says as follows: says Hashem, God is Tachlit Tovara. He is the ultimate good. So in terms of the goodness, so that is, Hashem would be the ultimate definition of that, the ultimate manifestation of. V'omnam mechokatov ulehetu. So the nature of good is to share goodness with others. Which is an interesting thing. Is there such a person who's a good person, but they don't really do so much for others? They're just a good person. So according to this, there's no such thing. That's you can't use the word good if it's not being shared. This definition of good, mechokatov, the nature of good is to give, is to share with others. Yeah.
So what are people saying that makes that person good? Or just
mistake.
say
Either a mistake or they're just using. You could say like that if you want to be a little harsh. You'd say they just don't understand what good means, which I think is fair, because I didn't understand what good means. I didn't understand that before I read this. Or you could say that there's elements of good in them, and they're just folks saying there's elements of that. But ultimately, there's something. Let's just at least say it like this in a fair way. There's certainly something lacking in someone's goodness if they're not sharing that with others. Okay. So anyway, so Hashem is the ultimate good, and the nature of good is to share of itself with others. So v'zehu ma shiratzahu yitbarach. This is what God wanted. This was His purpose in creating the world. Livro nivraim kedei shuchal leitiv lahem. To create something in order that He would, to create creations in order that He would be able to give goods to them. So that's like the purpose of the thing in the first place, from God's angle, is He is the ultimate good. He therefore wants and needs. You have to be a bit careful with using that word, but according to these definitions, within that realm, so to speak, needs to share that with others. So He needs others. So here we are. So the universe, the world, the plants, the animals, eventually the human being, and everything that we see is really the fruition of that project of sharing goodness with us. Yeah.
I feel like saying this makes it seem that like Hashem is like bound to like this like nature of what it means to be good.
Yeah. So this is what we're trying. The tricky thing that we're trying to emphasize is that there is in terms of understanding the ultimate depth of this, we can't. We reach a glass ceiling in our realm of understanding, because at the end of the day, we are within reality, and God transcends reality. So we can only understand up to reality. Obviously, even as any individual human being, we're not necessarily going to get to understanding all of reality, but even just by definition, the smartest human being who could ever be will only be able to understand to a certain extent. So in terms of God in and of Himself is infinite, and He's not, Him and His reasons for doing things are not something we can really truly have an understanding of in their ultimate sense. But relatively speaking, once God comes and makes a connection to the world, so from the point of connection, you can start to have an understanding. And this point of connection which God is making to the world is the point where He is manifesting goodness. And so the God that we relate to, in as much as we can relate to God, is the God of ultimate goodness. Is there something beyond that? Also, yeah, because even the word tov is defined. So even goodness, even though goodness is kind of like it really is the bridge between infinity and the finite world, because goodness is almost infinite. It's about expansion. But it's only a bridge. It's not absolute infinity, because otherwise you can use words, because words are finite. So this is what we're trying to try. It's a tricky, basically the Ramchal's whole book is basically again trying to deal with this issue of like understanding what we can and knowing what where our limits are as to what we can't, but within what we can understand. So this is something which is true that we can say. I imagine it a little bit like the tip of an iceberg. It's not a perfect analogy at all, but like the tip of an iceberg, you're looking at the tip of an iceberg. What are you seeing? You're not seeing the vast majority of the thing, but what you are seeing actually is the iceberg. It's not a fiction. It's not like just an analogy. It is real. It's just only a small part of the bigger picture. So that's kind of that's the stage where we can talk about good. Is something which is true. We just have to know that there's a lot more which is behind the scenes, which we won't be able to fully understand. Does that make sense? We can follow up. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Oh no, no,
Oh,
sorry.
okay, no worries. Okay, so this is okay. So we're thinking again. It's a big discussion. It's not really our main discussion today, but just to take as an axiom that the way that creation happened is that there was a will to do good, and then there was a creation of a world which is separate from God's, because there has to be la'achrini, there has to be something else to give to, and then there's gift of life to that world. When a person does chesed, they're basically doing that. They're basically doing this godly mode of giving good to something outside themselves, and that is the, as I say, at the peak of our understanding of creation itself, of God's will for the world to exist, is this move, whereas something outside oneself. And in general, the limit of the analogy is, of course, that we don't create the thing which is outside ourselves, but that's also not 100% true. There are places where it can come quite close to that. For example, having a family, you create something which is outside yourself, and then you give good to it. That's one of the that's a very spiritual thing that someone can do. And there's other versions of this as well. But even in general, even just going to a person who's on the street, a friend, someone you don't know, and giving to them and doing chesed with them. So that is an exercise in kind of like manifesting the purpose of creation, which is to take something which is other than yourself and give you of your goodness to it. So that could be one of the reasons why it's certainly one of the reasons why sharing good with others is such a central thing in our lives, and it's something which absolutely should be. And as the Nefesh HaChaim used to tell his family, this is zekol adam. This is what you're here for. Okay, so I want to yeah.
But is it enough to share with one's family, for example? Because family, I feel like is an extension of oneself. What if someone or every family only gives within their family and doesn't give to the outside? Yeah, so in that sense it's limited. Meaning it's not so much a yes or no, but it's more levels of gradations. So the first level of goodness would be to give of chesed, let's say, would be to give to your own family. Going beyond that would be to give to, and etc. There's levels. You can do it. The Rambam goes through. It's also a thing in philosophy as well, but to go through like the concentric circles of responsibility in terms of giving to others. So without going into the depth, but basically, giving to your family would be probably level one, and giving to the whole world would be somewhere along the line there. So it's an enhancement of the chesed for sure. It can go further. I would say, and this is a little bit of I don't know if this is such an issue for women. You can tell me it's a big issue for men. Is that there's a temptation to skip levels, which is not really the right thing to do. Meaning that you want to go out there and you want to change the world, but like you can't forget about your primary responsibilities, which is your family at home, primarily your wife and your children. Again, I'm speaking from the man's perspective. So I'm interested. I don't know if this is a human. I think it's a human issue to some extent. I think it may be a little more inclined towards males. I don't know if people have. It's like the classic complaint is that you're going out and doing all this stuff all day, and like where am I? It's a bit of a challenge that sometimes rabbis' families can have. Rabbis need to be very, very careful with this because their job is to go out and give to others all day, and sometimes the families suffer, which is a big problem. And it's a big It is on my consciousness. It's something one should not get carried away with. I know this is something which people have thoughts about, experience about.
Single women might have an issue where they neglect their own self, but once you have children, you're extremely aware that your home needs your attention because those those are like
Yeah.
a part of you outside of
Right.
yourself completely dependent
Right.
on.
You also alluded to something which is important. And there is that probably the real level one is doing chesed with yourself, because you have to make sure that you are fulfilled, and when you're fulfilled, you're more able to give to others. So that's probably the real level one, and then like level family, etc., etc. So yes, there is more to the picture than giving to one's own family for sure. Sure. Okay, so I wanted to do a bit of an exercise with you right now, and I wanted to think about. So this is we discussed a little bit about kind of the colossal significance of chesed and how important it should be in our lives, and why that might be. But I wanted to think a little bit about how to, meaning how do we make sure to put this into action in the best way. So I think, just to illustrate the need for an exercise, not all acts of chesed are created equal. At the extremes, you can have acts of chesed which were not really so enjoyable to receive. I don't know if anyone's ever received a gift which was not enjoyable, or a kindness, a service, someone doing something for you, and it didn't necessarily make you feel like so good. On the other hand, there's of course acts of chesed which are just the best thing ever. So, the question is, I've got one thing here which I'll discuss, but I just want to throw open first to the floor. Like, what do you think makes a good act of chesed? How can we make sure to apply this in our lives in really the best way? So, any thoughts? Be from examples, from your own thoughts. Yeah, Rich.
I've never had a gift that I didn't like when I received it, but yesterday, I was in a car and like the person who was driving parked, and then the person who got out of the car closed, like, you can like put the mirror like down so it doesn't like hit the side.
Yeah.
So he put the mirror down, but the guy in the driver's seat was like, oh, like I didn't want him to do that because when he pulls out, like he's gonna forget, to put it in the So I guess in that situation, he could have said like, do you want me to put your mirror down, instead of just like putting it down and walking away, because he thought it was helpful, but ultimately that wasn't actually helpful for the driver.
Yeah.
And he ended up undoing.
That's a good thing. So the idea the idea of asking first, as opposed to assuming what's best for someone, that's a pretty good quality. And then I think the example that you gave illustrated that really well. Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
I think like I just wanted to like kind of comment off of that, because it's kind of the same way that like Hashem gives us like a list of things that he wants from us. Like we have 613 mitzvot, and some people are like, oh, but I connect to Hashem like through this, like I'm like very spiritual, but I don't really like keep like Torah or anything. And it's like, but Hashem told you what he needs from you. And like that's the conduit of connection. So if you try to do something for someone without even asking, what do you need from me, like there's a more productive use of your energy, which is going to that person saying like, how can I help you, and then actually doing what's asked of you.
That's true. I just think it's a big thing, which and sometimes you can, even when they did tell you, sometimes you didn't listen, or you don't know how to listen, which is a big thing. I just said it's a big thing. People have come across the 5 love languages. People have come across this. So yeah, it's not a Jewish source. It's a Christian source, honestly. Meaning the author is a Christian. But there's a lot of truth in what he says, and kind of like the concept of the book is that there can be people who are genuinely expressing their love for each other, but neither one of the other side is like feeling it. It's feeling loved. It's like, how does that happen? Because each person has different love languages, and each person has ways that they feel loved, which are not necessarily the same as the other one. And so there can be, that's one of those cases where this kind of thing can happen, is that someone told you, but you can't really compute what they asked for, because when you think of love, you think of a different thing. And so that's important. Yeah, it's an important thing about communication on the speaker's end, on the listener's end, sensitivity. Yeah, that's a journey. That's a journey to make sure to do that, but really important to do that. Yeah. Caleb.
I think like there's a lot of ways to do chesed like in the best way.
Yeah.
But I'm always pro doing it in a way that kind of sustains, that it's not just like a one-time thing, but just like if you give a man a fish, and it's dinner for one day, the man had a fish.
Yeah.
So I think that is my favorite best way.
Yeah, I think it's great. I was involved in international development a little for a while. Maybe I'll talk a bit more about that. But I was from basically aged like 18 to like 25 or something, in South Africa actually, and this is like a very big issue in the world of like aid and international development. It's kind of a similar version, like
Yeah.
asking, but like there's this classic thing. I don't know, I can't remember who it was. I think I remember the celebrity which was, but they sent like thousands and thousands of sneakers, as you call them, trainers, to like an impoverished community. It was just like were like destroyed like quite quickly. Like it's like you have to. It's also interesting enough the charity I was dealing with there, like very hard hitting charity, dealt with like very very serious issues, and they said because they pull people's heartstrings by the work that they do, so everyone wants to do something for them, but they always so like it's quite funny. I don't know if this is true in other places, but like maybe it's this African thing is that like so many people buy them a car. And they're like, we don't have it. Don't buy us a car. Don't buy us a car. We don't have any more room. It costs us money. Like, don't buy us a car, whatever you do. It's like quite funny. Everyone's like buying a car. But that's like a comic version of it. But yeah, I think that's kind of the idea. Yeah, I think that's something which is really important. Is there's like a gift, quick fix, or not even a fix sometimes. But then there's the thing which is actually sustainable. So that's the real thing to work on. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, how much?
Also, I think also like with a low ego when you're giving, not being like, oh yeah, I'm giving because I'm better than you.
Yeah. That's also the part of the same. Yeah, there's something they call volunteerism. I don't know if you know that. You can imagine what it is. Volunteer tourism. It's basically you go and you get. There are funny sketches made this over the years, but it's also just reality that like people go to like third world countries. I mean,
To teach kids English.
I'm not on Instagram, but I imagine Instagram is probably full of people posting pictures of stuff like helping these people, guys, and then like it's not really about the other people; it's really about them. Anyway, that's really. But the opposite extreme is what it should be is that you think is. It's not really about you. Not going in with like I'm so special. Here's an amazing thing I'm doing. But thinking about what's on the other end, which is again what Hashem did, right? Meaning Hashem's thinking about what's on the other end. Hashem ultimately doesn't have needs. So why is he giving to us? He's thinking about what we need. So that's a way that we should do that. Yeah, for sure. I think there's another hand somewhere. Yeah.
I think like on the receiver's end, like whenever something is given out of pity, or whenever something is given when it's like undeserved, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. What would be? Can you do like an example of like an undeserved, like such a thing, undeserved thing, or
if someone is promoted but they didn't really do anything to get that promotion, like it feels good, but like they don't savor it in the same way that they would if it was like given to them because they actually put in the effort for it.
Yeah. That definitely can happen. I think that relates also to Chaim's point of that as well, about like it can be like high ego on one end can lead to like kind of like patronizing approach on the other end, and that's something which can make you not feel very good about that.
Kind of an example that it's connected to both is a lot of times Shabbos meals will invite people, but you'll be like I had a Shabbos meal recently where I was sitting there and like just sitting there and chatting with my friend and eating their food, and I was like, like I don't need food, like I can get food anywhere. I can make my own food. I'm here for like to meet you guys. And it was just really odd. I was like, it felt really weird. It's very strange.
Yeah, that can definitely happen. I have examples of things. I know there are people, who basically because they know it's a good thing to have a Chesed worship, so they try and do it, and they try and go big sometimes. I just think. By the way, there was a family who went really really big on a Chesed thing, on inviting guests for Shabbos and stuff, like really big. They would have like 50 guests, like every Shabbos, and it's like on the one hand, like it's an amazing thing, but I didn't necessarily get the vibe from them that it was. They said this because they like hosting. They said they like. So that shouldn't be the real
the real thing. There's such a thing as getting fulfillment from your chesed. That's different. We'll come back to that in a minute. But there should be the motivation, and hence you can end up with the things like that on the other end.
And
You'll feel like abandoned within your own chesed. What was that?
You could also have a table of 50 guests and they actually feel important.
Yeah, which I've also had. I don't know at 50, but yeah, I've been at big tables and there are people they just make you feel like $1 million and like, wow, that's what you like. What more do you want? Like that's amazing. Okay, fine. So let's have a little look at source over here. And honestly, I think it was actually amazing because I think it relates to basically everyone, everything which people have said. So let's continuing in the Da'at. So we're kind of trying to think about the godly version of giving, of chesed, and how does that actually come about? Because I think if people, you first hear that message, sounds very nice, God, his will was to give good to others, and so he created the world. But you only need to look around you to start questioning that and be like, wait, then why is my life really hard? Why is everything really hard all the time? Yeah. So because we need the next bit, that's all. So is it on that? In order that the bestowal of good would be complete, a complete bestowal of good, meaning like a perfect version of that. So yada b'chokhmato haniskava, shera'oi she'eh hamakablim ota makablim ota b'yagia kapa. God understood that the receivers would need to receive that good through the work of their own hands, through their own efforts. Because then they would be the owners. They would be the owners of that good. And then they wouldn't have any shame or embarrassment in receiving what is being given to them. Like a person who's receiving charity. Again, there's better and worse ways to do that, but that's not something which people really want to. Like, I want to be invited. Yeah, like being invited to Shabbos guests. That's nice. Being a recipient of tzedakah, not so nice. Not so nice. And he continues. Amru quotes Chazal. Mishami says, "Man da'achil delav delay." Someone who's eating something which isn't theirs. Bahit istukule ba'ape. They're ashamed to look in the face of the one who's given it to them. So you see that basically there's a way of giving which is going to kind of empower and build a person, make them feel good about himself. And there's a way of giving which is going to make a person feel smaller and feel that they don't even want to look at you, which is not the idea. And I think that really basically touches on almost everything that people were saying. Let's go through a little bit. The idea of like asking first. So if you're thinking about what the other, I'll put it like this. I think there's one thing which we can kind of take from it all is that it's really about thinking about the other person as opposed to thinking about yourself. I think that's really the thing which it all boils down to. If you're yeah.
One other thing, sometimes like the best way to give to other people is letting them give to you.
That's also a big thing as well, which is which is basically what Hashem is essentially does. This is in as much as in the different ways, making us partners with him, but also tefillah, which we'll see, it's called the tzorach gavoa. It helps Hashem in some way. We have to understand that on a theological level, but ultimately we see the move which is made there is that he allows us to give to him in a meaningful way. And that's something which is really important. That's really tricky, by the way, because it doesn't look like you're doing a chesed. It looks like you're receiving something. But if you're discerning, you can find that certain times that is actually something which is really important. Anyway, so where we over? So basically this is this idea about giving goods to others in a way which they kind of earn for themselves or helps them feel like it's theirs. It really is theirs. So that really goes into the whole thing in terms of like, asking for it versus no. I'll relate that to what was said later in terms of like, kind of like in a pity kind of way. As in that's like a way of giving, which is looking down upon someone else. You're not even asking them. You're not even treating them as a person to ask them what they actually want or to think what they actually want. You just give whatever. It doesn't make someone feel like very good. That makes someone feel like I say it's interesting because at the end of the day they do have a thing from you, and that might help them financially or otherwise. So it's the physical thing they have, But the point of the chesed was to make someone feel good and have a good life, and you didn't really do that. So that's on one. In terms of a sustainability, so this is the big thing. This is the exact which one you say, the teach a man to fish thing.
Yeah.
That's basically exactly this. If you can teach skills, the highest level of tzedakah is giving someone a job. As you can give tzedakah is to give something which someone needs. But the highest level of tzedakah, the Rambam says, is to help them get a job that is sustainable. And that's something which is, then they're going to be the owners of that good, which is like just totally next level. In terms of low ego, I think that's what we're talking about. If you need to, the biggest ego thing to do would be to completely give to them and completely ignore their own input, total input from me, no input from them. If you want to build your ego, that's the way to do it. So we see that a high ego is not the way to go in Chesed. It's to actually think about the other person, put them in the center. You're on the side, they're in the center, and think about them first. And if you think about them first, you'll see that actually it might be doing something sometimes more minimal, which will actually be a greater chesed for them. And in terms of the things in terms of effort, that was literally like basically a one-to-one over here. And I think interesting, the thing about that's what we said already in terms of letting them do good for you. That's like the ultimate version of them being the Balei Tov, which happens to be that particular person that we were just talking about before, who's the social worker I was working with, who didn't feel alive. So one of the things which was trying to emphasize them is that it's important that this person does something which is meaningful during the course of the day. It's for various reasons it's quite hard for that person to do something which is productive or meaningful, but it's really important for someone to do that. And you often find, this is an interesting thing, I'll just tell you an interesting story, actually, that there's a person I know whose son was struggling with mental health stuff, depression, for many years, and Baruch Hashem, it's sort of like it got better. After many years, it got better. How did it get better? Because they got a dog. And the person said to me, the dog did what all the therapists couldn't do. The interpretation I have of that, which comes at there's different kinds of animal therapy things, quite interesting, is that you're a giver. You become a giver. I suppose. Was that?
That's what it's saying.
Yeah, and also you can actually succeed for once in life, which is something some people never succeeded in life. You can actually succeed. You can help another living thing. And that's something which is very empowering. So so just kind of back to your point, just referring on that point, that then you become Balatov, you become someone who's the owner of good, as opposed to just a mere receiver. So this is something that we can think about, in our Chesed journeys. So just kind of by way of recap, that there are different things which are giving life to the world. Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim, and we'll go into all of them. And what does it mean to give life to the world? It means to promote the connection between God and the world, between the spiritual and the physical. Through all these things, we're promoting and sustaining the connection between the physical and the spiritual, and we're giving life to the world. What that means is not just in the Chesed sense. It's not even just the person that you're giving to, who you're giving to. You're actually giving to the whole world, because in that act of Chesed, a whole flood of Chesed from God just came into the world as well for everyone's benefit. So it's really interesting to think about that. Why this is something which is absolutely central. The Nefesh HaChaim was telling his family that this was the center point of life. Zeh kol ha'adam. This is the center point of life, is to share goodness with another. In doing so, we are kind of emulating God in His creation of the world, to take something which is outside oneself and to bestow to it. And really, really important points. And you can all think about this and apply this yourself in terms of how that should be done in a way which is ultimately going to allow the others to be empowered, to be the Ba'alei Atov, the owners of that good, and not people who are feeling down as a result of you giving to them, but people who are feeling up. So, maybe be able to do this to give life to the world and do chesed with others, and do chesed which makes other people feel big and not small.